Well, you may not know this about us, folks, but we're here to bring you the Squeaky Wheel. With me, as always, my very good friend, Lawrence the President Gervais. And folks, I'm Ross, Memphis, Pambrun, and we are bringing you the Squeaky Wheel. Just happens to be, it's National Clown Week. Lawrence, it just seems fitting because here we are sitting back together again. As well, it's also, we're at the area of National Girlfriends Day. So let's try not to make any inappropriate comments because I could just see how that would somehow get us both into trouble. But welcome, Lawrence, to the show, and welcome to all of our listeners.
Well, you could celebrate your girlfriend being a clown in the same week, but I probably wouldn't call him a clown. But
yeah, so when I run into that situation, please, nobody tell my wife, because otherwise it'll be very confusing. But that's the reason I don't walk around with as much clown makeup, because, that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to get caught somehow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't want to say that to your girlfriend. Happy Clown Week, because they'll think, oh, it's my makeup, right? But
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you look wonderful today. Your clown makeup is actually put on quite beautifully. Yeah, I can see how easy it would be to get into trouble for that. Lawrence, we got 100 things to talk about. We had a little bit of a break there just as a result of how busy things got caught up after Stampede. But we've got the lead up that came into the annual General Assembly. We got to talk Constitution, the rodeo, the leadership, Métis. Why don't you start off right off the bat? Let's jump right into the fact that the annual General Assembly, the 94th Métis Nation of Alberta Annual General Assembly, just occurred down here in Calgary at the Grey Eagle. So for all of our listeners, thank you to those of you who attended. Thank you to those of you who came up to chat with both Lawrence and I, and very much for your kind words when it came to listening to our podcast. Lawrence, give me your thoughts.
no, it was a wonderful 4 days. Lots of debate, lots of good discussion, and we ended up with now a vote that's going to the people in the province to certainly look at this new constitution that's been developed. So, we're pretty excited about that and the hard work we're going to do this year to get those polling stations there and of somewhat, or if it's mail-in, I'm not sure what the process will be yet. But we'll definitely update everybody as it goes along here.
Well, and having listened to everybody who came up to the mic, you could hear some of the confusion. A lot of people were like, well, does this all of a sudden mean we have a constitution? Does this mean that we'll never be heard again and nobody will ever listen to us, and that the next 5 years will just be, under a rock and no conversation? No, I think what I'd like to see and what I anticipate as part of the process is we're finally moving forward. And that seemed to be a bit of the theme, that we're going to move forward with this, continue to have conversation, and build the framework of how the community will be involved.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, those people who kind of go out there and spread misinformation and try to kind of get to those ones who don't quite know or are a little bit confused, I don't know really what to say to those people. Because they have an understanding, they have the ability to understand the message, but then they send the wrong information over to the members, right? But then majority, thank God, actually know what's going on. And they know how valuable this piece of this legislation, this constitution, where it's headed. Because if we would have ended up saying no, who knows how long it would have been to get a yes, right? Especially considering the government and how it changes, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think what people have to realize is, and I want everybody and all of our listeners to pay attention to this, if somebody gives you some information and you find yourself angry about whatever this individual has said, reach out to your local, up through to the region, right? Your regional vice president, your president, like Lawrence, you're always willing to answer those questions. But if all of a sudden somebody gives you some information and makes you angry, find out what the truth is, or something that, then you can understand. Because if all of a sudden, somebody's spreading some misinformation out there and you get angry, well, you didn't learn the actual, what was actually the truth. So I think it's really important that we realize there are people like you who are elected officials who are accountable to answer those questions and say, well, here's the direction, here's what our goal is, or here's what the nation is working towards. Does that seem like a fair statement rather than getting angry? Absolutely.
There's people they get emotional and they don't, when they get confused, or they think that they're told that we're taking advantage of our members when we're not. We're actually trying to advocate for more rights and laws and to get to that sovereign place that certainly Lou Riel had thought about in the past, right? So we have to get there first. So in order for us to get there, we have to go through these processes and look at, these agreements and what we set up. And it's not to take advantage really of anybody. It's actually get our foot in the door so we're not constantly led by Societies Act and continue just to be either getting a program or not getting a program. And it's really access to funds. And so we can bring that to our people. That's the most important thing.
Well, and if you're an M&A member, you can attend. And I mean, Audrey Poitras was there, our president of the Métis Nation of Alberta. Dan Cardinal was there, vice president of the Métis Nation of Alberta. The president of the Métis National Council, Cassidy Caron, was there. The people who you want in the room and the people who you can ask questions to. I walked up to every one of them and was free to ask a question so that I understood a little bit more about what was going on, right? All the regional representation, Lawrence, you were there. Anytime anybody wants to ask a question, you were there. So, this is the process, folks. Get involved or get out of the way. That's a bit of, my answer, I find, when it comes to things. But you're always, if you ask for the information, it should be made available for you. I think that's what's important. Let's talk a little bit about the rodeo, Lawrence. That was the Friday night event. I got to admit, I had a great time. I was so happy that I got a chance to play Memphis and the Grande. Now, I didn't get to bring out most of my band this time, but we had Pistol Noon, who was there to back up myself. We had Billy Joseph on the fiddle and his guitar, and he burned that place down. Mr. Richard Pichet came out. George Pambrun, my father, got to lay a few songs down. And we had the Jiggers who were out for the day. So you know what? The rodeo was great. The weather was great. The transportation, the Gerlitz Ranch and the family who took good care of us. Did you not think that it just worked out fabulous?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the first one, I think it was a success. Certainly there was misinformation on the buses, but, I think the people that came and showed up had a wonderful time and gave us a lot of accolades. And I think, news travels. So, if we do another one next year or next summer, we'll be able to attract certainly, hopefully, an audience across the province, right?
Well, and that's one of the comments that I made sort of at the AGA was just I made mention to a few people that, I've got experience being an MC. And what we lacked was a little bit of a bit of direction, because even my own father had heard, well, the buses go out at 4:30 and they don't come back to 11. We need a bit of that leadership as an MC of somebody at these events where people can walk up to and go, hey, this is what I heard. Yeah. And though, there's sort of people available at the registration desks as they would be put up or put down, I enjoyed my experience. I'm throwing my hat in the ring. I've done this many, many times when it comes to events, emceeing them. I think I'd really like to enjoy that. And I hope all of our listeners out there, if you know anybody and you want an MC or you want to make that comment to the M&A provincial office, send them my name. Memphis Pambrun. Ross Memphis Pambrun would love to do it. And I already made that comment, but I think sometimes that would clear a few of those things up. But other than that, everything seemed to run really, really well. The meals were great.
Yeah, it was great. Food was great.
Big shout out. Give me the shout out to the Grey Eagle.
Yeah, they did a wonderful job hosting us. And, we were pretty excited to be there. But yeah, I think from beginning to the end, there wasn't certainly a lot of issues. I mean, for the amount of people that came, certainly we had to book up 4 hotels altogether, and certainly Grey Eagle was one that was booked. But no, it was just a wonderful place to be, and just everything was all there for large conferences like ours.
Well, and for anybody who didn't attend at the rodeo, it wasn't necessarily at the Gerlitz Ranch a whole rodeo. What they did was demonstration of pretty much all the events that can happen and let people see how horses get saddled. And then they had all sorts of fun little events. But, again, for me, the music is always part of, one of my favorite parts. But the food was great. Everything was good about it. And, at the AGA, I went over and I went to the tents and I got to see Piron, for example, who were part of the economic development area, and Rupert's Land that was there. there were so many things that were going on, both to engage families, to engage business, to engage the connection of cultural connection. Mike Parks had his maps out there. There was some energy groups. There was a lot of really positive places that you could go to. But, Lawrence, we walked over, and what I didn't realize was in the youth room, they were doing a leadership and governance. They were listening to the annual General Assembly, and Mitch was explaining what all of the actions that were happening and the rules behind it. I thought, how great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly, it's, especially for our young people, it's, jigging and all those cultural activities are important, but when they're there at the AGM or the AGA, really doing their sort of mock AGM, like getting to the habit of that, of how meetings are and how what Robert's rules are and certainly our bylaws, and getting accustomed to that, and certainly the different groups that are involved in the room, and it's the different ministries and learning all about it. There's just a lot to dissect, right? So I'm really happy and glad that they went through all that this year.
Yeah, I wish I'd been sitting in that room when I was a youth and then all of a sudden started to realize how the processes worked. A friend of mine had popped in. He's the Métis director of 3 Story Pictures in Saxon, and he brought his family, and I don't think he realized there was a children's room, and they were actually helping teach Michif language. So as the kids were in there playing and engaging, there was the sort of the notion of the game that they would say a word, maybe help them understand it, help them explain it, and they'd have pictures around the room, and then the kids would race over if they had a guess as to what the word represented, whether it was like eagle or whether it was fox. And there was the people who were there in the room to help coordinate it, engaging, a lot of fun. I know I'm touting the AGA, but it was just wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It was a great meeting.
And I also got to say a big shout out to Alex Kusteruk, who came down, right? He's the fiddle player who brings in our show, but he came down also to play with Rockin Fiddle, Donnie Lirindell, Kyle Desjardins. Their band just burned up Saturday night, right? Just a wonderful band, great music that was, and the stage that was supplied by the Grey Eagle. And then we had the Métis Family Child Services dancers who were out. We had our provincial dancers who made sure that we all got a bit more familiarity with how well, if you pay attention and do it properly and you commit to it, you can do the Métis jig, the Red River jig, you can do the duck dance, you can the slow fast waltzes. They just beautiful. All the dancers and their costumes. If you just come out for that, you're gonna smile at the end of the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the dance, and that was pretty exciting, and all the food and the desserts, and really hard to get away from, and it was a pretty awesome event at the event center at Grego.
Absolutely great event. Let's jump on a few other things that I've been reading about, Lawrence, because we got through Stampede, and that was a long 10 days. Yeah. We worked our way up. We knew this was coming. My bands played quite a bit, Memphis and the Grande, and thank you to all of our Métis listeners and friends of ours who follow me, Memphis Pambrun, and follow the band now. It means the world that you join us on our social medias and that you come out. Then we hit into the annual General Assembly. I know we're going to have another golf tournament that you're slowly starting to work on, hopefully for the Marlene Lance here, I think in August. And let's give it a little time and breathe so that we can make sure that we get it organized. And I was just reading an article in CBC. Janine Crouchy's design symbolizes, she's just designed a 1 ounce silver coin. And it's the first one that she's a world-renowned Métis artist, and it's the Red River Métis coin. So it's a Canadian mint. On it, it says in Michif, believe in yourself, believe in Métis. We'll get Leighton to throw a picture up. It's just fabulous. There's only 5,000 of them being printed or stamped, as it were. And I will be honest, I just ordered mine before the show, so I'm excited to see it when it shows up. But what a neat idea. It's something I hadn't even thought of, but this is the first one being done with a 1 ounce silver coin.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited that you got one. I got one already. And
did you?
Yeah. And I also have a
rascal.
Louis Round Centennial one from, I think, about 5 years ago, too. So, Yeah.
Now that I think is just a quarter though, isn't it? I don't think that's
right.
1 ounce.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would love to get my hands on one of those. I don't often order things like that, but I looked at it and the flower and what sort of the representation of the beading that's on there, just beautiful. So hopefully you have a look at the picture here, folks. And if you get a chance and you want to be one of the 5,000, get your hands on one. Another thing I was reading about was CBC Radio Canada wants to hear from the Indigenous communities about what they want from their public broadcaster. So I wasn't even aware of this, but I'm happy that I get to share it. Since April, they've been traveling across Canada, meeting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and they want to know, they want their input about the diverse cultures and how they're going to build their programs. So they've already visited Winnipeg, Saskatoon, Yellowknife, a few places, Edmonton, Halifax, and if we look as to online, I'm sure you'll be able to find out where they're coming next. Step up, folks. Get out to it and tell them what you want to hear when it comes to your public broadcaster. Because in the end, we're all paying for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they're producing shows and producing Métis content, fantastic. I've yet to see it where it's just a focus on Métis. I know APTN does a few shows, but CBC I think really needs to get to that place pretty soon here.
Where they're a bit more just focusing on some Métis engagement. I agree, 100%. And but we've got to be a part of making that comment, as you and I talk about all the time on our show and in every aspect of our connection. It's the hidden people. It's been the longest time. I have people all the time come up to me and ask me, what's the difference between Aboriginal, Indian, Métis, First Nation? What's the right term? At least I'm even starting to hear the term Métis in that sentence. So, we are being a part of that. And that's what the Squeaky Wheel is about. And thank you to all of our listeners who send us the information that they want to hear.
Well, there is a solution, and CBC needs to speak to Squeaky Wheel. And we'll produce those shows for them, right?
So, anybody here who's listening from the CBC, make sure you reach out to us. And we're going to try and do our part to reach out to you. That's going to be a big important part of the conversation. Tons of positions are available within the Métis Nation of Alberta. If you go onto their website, albertamétis.com, consultation roles, administration, projects, navigators, environment, Métis Crossing, which is an hour north of Edmonton, northeast of Edmonton. They're looking for different coordinators, different roles. There's lots of ways to continue to engage within your community, and there's ones where you can be work, or there's also ones where you can just be a part of learning and continuing to share and understand about the Métis community, because there's so many programs that are available out there for families, for elders, for youths, for business. These are your places where you get a chance to connect. So let's talk a little bit about the Pope, Lawrence. Came to town, visited, made his comments about the fact that he apologizes for the role of the church. He accepts the fact that the church had a role in genocide. It's time to start healing. What do you think?
I would rather see it maybe a couple of years from now to actually see what happens. Because, I'm used to that Stephen Harper apology that happened and only a few things changed, right? But then the TRC kind of moved in, and that was all the residential school survivors that contributed to that process to hear from the survivors. A lot of people think the government had a lot to do with that, but no, it came from the survivors because they wanted to uncover the truth, and they did, right? And they moved mountains since, but the government still hasn't responded to all those TRC recommendations. So we kind of know as Indigenous community that we kind of sit back and we watch. Once those people make those apologies and those acknowledgements, we kind of sit back and watch what they're going to do, right? And I'm on that same boat, right? I don't believe it until I see it, pretty much.
You know what? That's actually a really good point. We've seen politicians apologize to things that they've done in the past, and we're going to make change, and then the change just doesn't seem to happen.
That's right.
And I agree. You know what? That's really important. What we've said right now needs to lead to an action that we start to learn from in the future. So we need to see how the church continues to listen to and follow the concerns or the stress or the challenges within the Indigenous communities and responds to it and says, yes, we still know that we have a role to play in your healing as well as listening. I think that's great, Lawrence. And you're right. If it happened tomorrow, then it might not happen in the future. So we need to continue to watch and see where these things end up.
That's right. And, for us, we're going to continue telling the stories. We got a grant to produce some Dunbow Residential School a documentary, some vignettes, and, encourage the others to look at their own local residential school and start telling the stories publicly. And then, continue supporting the ground penetrating radar that is uncovering these burial grounds, right? And until we get to the full extent of what had happened, then, we will continue to do that as Indigenous communities. But on the other end, certainly they have to look at ways and on how they're going to deal with it too, right?
Mm-hmm. And hopefully the church heard or has read about some of the reactions. The woman who sang the anthem at the, let's call it the Papal exhibition during the experience, singing to O Canada, but putting in
her own words.
I think it was her own words in the sense of a Indigenous prayer, mm-hmm. and then finished with hi hi. And this is embarrassing, Lawrence, and again, we're all here to learn. I always thought that meant sort of thank you, here we are in the conversation, and yet it means I'm done talking.
That's right. It's kind of like a kosi, but hi hi means I'm finished. Yeah.
And maybe maybe that's, you didn't just say it once. It was, here, hi hi, now let the other person talk.
That's right.
But it was a profound hi hi where she's saying, that's it. This is where I finished my role here, and I don't need to do more. I think, and the way that it was done so that the media reacted to share that awareness. Mm-hmm. It was very, very moving. I was very impressed. And it wasn't, it wasn't done in a way that it was violent. It wasn't done in a way that was extremely protesting. This was conversation. This was still, involved in the action that was happening there. So and now we look into things like the University of Saskatchewan that's continuing to root out identity fraud. And I think one of the reasons being is that, here we're starting to look back and see, here's people who said that they're Indigenous and they were taking jobs working within these different academic regions. But U of S is saying, without seeing appropriate status cards, without seeing appropriate information that you have a Métis mm-hmm. card, a citizenship card, and allowing these agencies like the Métis Nation of Alberta to be a part of that conversation, ensuring that the representation is happening appropriately. These are the steps that we have to take. Otherwise, here we've run into the situation where people just go, hey, there's a little bit of Indigenous in the background, so I'll just take that job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it discredits, what people work for. Because, behind the scenes, in order to get those jobs, in place, there's a behind the scenes. There's a bit of work to actually happen. Sometimes it takes years to get those salaries there. And for somebody to kind of move in who's not Indigenous or identifies and can't really prove a connection, mm-hmm. It does get a little bit of a sticky issue, right?
And that's not to say that those people aren't working towards getting positive information. Just don't misrepresent.
Yeah, but as long as they're in the process of finding it, because there's people that will just say it and they don't even bother going.
That's a good point too, right? There's also, right, we allow people to believe. I had somebody recently ask me, I was wearing my it's a beaded poppy, and I know I've worn it on our show before, and it was provided to me for speaking at Bow Valley College, I had some role there. I was doing something, and it was just beautiful. And they said, well, are you, what allows people to wear that? And I said, I think to me, if you're wearing anything out of respect, and if somebody says, hey, where did that come from? Or can you explain that to me? Or how is that important to you? Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the most important things. I relish the fact that we continue to share culturally, both as Métis people, but then all other cultures. You know, I don't try to wear clothes to try and necessarily make any unintended suggestions that I'm trying to wear something inappropriately. If I'm wearing it, it's generally because I'm excited and sharing that connection, and it may have been provided to me or something I want to wear for my community. It's much like wearing a sash. I was recently provided one from Batoche from the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. Beautiful. Well, if I wear that, am I misrepresenting that I'm not Albertan or that I'm too much Saskatchewan? No, I'm wearing it with pride. And if anybody asks, I'm excited to say this was gifted to me from
That's
that
right.
nation.
Yeah, you know, and you know, I've been gifted sashes and all those things, but I've also been gifted eagle feathers, right? I have a couple, and there's always a story behind each one, and I have to know it. You know, that's why the elders, when they hand it to you, it's not just it's just an acknowledgement. They give you a reason behind it. You know, why you've earned it, why you've gained this. So you're able to tell that when people ask, right? How did you receive it?
Great point. I think that's maybe what this comes down to. Wear something with pride, but be able to explain if it's a very cultural thing that maybe doesn't represent your culture, how it affected you, how it impacted you, and then you get to share some of that. So, Leighton, send the signal out. Lawrence, the light's on. It's time to talk Indigenous plants. What do you got for us today?
Well, I think I have one, and this one it's all about if you get venereal disease. So maybe it is suitable to maybe after rodeo season. I'm not sure. But, you know, to treat, boil together 3 cups of water with 3 tablespoons of grated white poplar bark. So it's very important to get white poplar bark. This is the inner bark under the top skin layer. The bark can be fresh from the tree or dried bark, which was prepared for winter's use. Boil for 3 minutes, cover, set aside to cool. This is one dosage, and 1/2 cup every 2 hours with plenty of other liquids. The infusion acts upon what's that?
Are we drinking this or are you pouring it on something?
Oh no, you drink this.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't know if you're supposed to soak something in this or
no.
Okay, so this is actually
because it gets to your kidneys and your urinal tract, so that's a little under the skin.
Okay, yeah.
This is
an important part of the story, folks. If you've been down this road here, start listening because this is obviously one of the historic kind of practices.
Now, generally, one recipe is all that is needed if treated at the first signs of infection. Many take a second dosage, but a bit milder by adding more water. This is to make sure that all signs of the infection are cleared up. So it looks like white poplar is a good remedy for venereal disease.
Okay, so here's the thing that I want to remind everybody. There's traditional medicine. There's also Western healing medicine. Don't preclude that we suggest you shouldn't explore these both options, and make sure you follow the recommendations of your family physician. You know, here on the Squeaky Wheel, we're trying to give you some awareness of the history of Indigenous sort of treatments and medicines, but please don't presume that we know all the answers. We're telling you a little bit of a story from the history books that we've read.
Yeah, but also at the same time, sometimes it's hard to see a doctor now, or sometimes it's like something that you might be embarrassed to go and do. But I definitely would see an elder. That's number one. They can help you with getting the white poplar. You don't going out there by yourself because you might be using birch bark or something that may not be of use to you, right? So definitely you want to seek an elder before you do these things.
So don't just shave down a 2x4 and start boiling that up. That's not going to do anything for you. So yes, okay, make sure you reach out to your elders. Make sure you reach out to whoever is connected within your health community. Look up albertametis.com. We also have resources there.
Yep.
And make sure you follow us. And if you have those questions, send them over to us, tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca. We love all of the messages that we get. Make sure you click subscribe on our YouTube channel. It means everything because those numbers are what's important for us to continue to get funding to support our programs. And again, thank you to all of our listeners. Lawrence, Roger E. Mosley. I don't know how much time you spent watching Magnum PI, but he was the African American pilot, and he just he had a smile, he had charisma. He's the guy who made me want to be a helicopter pilot, and I just it's one of those. If you don't have the opportunity, maybe you'll never make it. But he sadly passed away. But he was one of the characters in all 8 seasons of Magnum PI. I just loved that show with Tom Selleck. How it was filmed in Hawaii. We lose a lot of great actors. That one would just hit me with a little bit of nostalgia.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Have you watched the newer one, Magnum PI?
I've caught some of the trailers of it.
Yeah.
But and I probably should. I bet you I'd probably think it was just as good. But back in the time, I don't think anybody ever died on Magnum PI. But it was, you always felt like there was this risk, this tremendous risk. And seeing that Lamborghini Ferrari, as it raced up and down the Hawaii coastline, it made me want to be there. But I remember that brightly colored helicopter, so it's lost to the acting community. But price of gas is on its way down. Lawrence, wrap up our show, because that's one thing that's going to make people smile to hear.
Yeah, I think we're on RV season's still around, so I think it's great. Having to fill your tank and not have to worry about money and feeding your kids when you go camping, right? But yeah. But no, it's great.
I would suggest it's probably down about 20%, so that is helpful.
Mm-hmm. But hopefully it stays down. So, but we know that unrest that's happening in Russia may be an influence on it, right? So hopefully they resolve all that.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, and our thoughts are always with the people of Ukraine and the challenges that are happening around the world, and the mass confusion that I think is happening in Taiwan versus China. Folks, let's just work to try and get along. From all of us here at the Squeaky Wheel, Lawrence, again, I always appreciate everything. For all of our listeners, Lawrence is very connected on LinkedIn. Make sure you reach out to him. Look for me on LinkedIn. Please look up my band, Memphis and the Grande. Create the opportunities for artists. It takes a community to build an artist, and it takes all of our listeners continue to help us build the Squeaky Wheel. So from all of us here and from all of us behind the scenes, keep the wheel squeaking. The Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, Memphis Region 3, and the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca, or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.